Before President Trump traveled to Asia, he faced other world leaders at the Group of Seven Economic Summit in Canada. Allies that are upset over new tariffs he's imposed on steel and aluminum imports. Joining us now, one of the architects of that controversial plan, White House trade advisor Peter Navarro. Mr. Navarro, the summit ended with a nasty dust-up between President Trump and Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau. He held a news conference after the summit in which he said Canada will retaliate for tariffs that the U.S. has imposed on Canadian aluminum and steel. Here is Trudeau.
We move forward with retaliatory measures on July 1st, applying equivalent tariffs to the ones that the Americans have unjustly applied to us. Canadians were polite, we're reasonable, but we also will not be pushed around.
Well, President Trump responded with this tweet while flying here on Air Force One to Singapore. Trudeau of Canada acted as so meek and mild during our G7 meetings, only to give a news conference after I left. Very dishonest and weak. Question, Mr. Navarro, is that really how we want to deal with our second biggest trading partner?
Chris, there's a special place in hell for any foreign leader that engages in bad faith diplomacy with President Donald J. Trump and then tries to stab him in the back on the way out the door. And that's what bad faith Justin Trudeau did with that stunt press conference. That's what weak, dishonest Justin Trudeau did. And that comes right from Air Force One. And I'll tell you this, to my friends in Canada, that was one of the worst political miscalculations of a Canadian leader in modern Canadian history. All Justin Trudeau had to do was take the win. President Trump did the courtesy to Justin Trudeau to travel up to Quebec for that summit. He had other things, bigger things on his plate in Singapore, where you are now, Chris. He did him a favor, and he was even willing to sign that socialist communique. And what did Trudeau do as soon as the plane took off from Canadian airspace? Trudeau stuck our president in the back. That will not stand. And as far as this retaliation goes, the American press needs to do a much better job of what the Canadians are getting ready to do, because it's nothing short of an attack on our political system, and it's nothing short of Canada trying to raise its high protectionist barriers even higher on things like maple syrup and other goods.
Mr. Navarro, I got a lot to talk to you about, but I do have to press this. You used some very strong words. Stab in the back, special place in hell. You said that came from Air Force One. Are those the views? Are those the words of the president?
Those are my words, but they're the sentiment that was on Air Force One after that. Look, Chris, this was just wrong what Trudeau was doing. The Canadians are totally bungling our trade relationships, and it's due to their leadership. Take NAFTA, for example. We'd have a deal. We'd have a great deal with NAFTA by now if the Canadians would spend more time at the bargaining table and less time lobbying Capitol Hill and our press and state governments here. They are just simply not playing fair, dishonest, weak.
Well, I want to pick up on this, though, Mr. Navarro, because it isn't just Canada. Germany's Chancellor, Angela Merkel, released a photo of the summit, and there was no comment on it, but it certainly looked like it was President Trump against the other members of the G6, America's closest allies. And I want to pick up on this point, because the last time you were on with me on Fox News Sunday, you said that no country would retaliate for the tariffs that we're going to impose. But let's take a look at, in fact, what has happened since we last talked. Canada has announced tariffs on $13 billion in U.S. goods. The European Union will impose tariffs on $3 billion in American products. I understand, sir, that the objective of the president's trade policy, with your advice, some would call it a trade war, is to get the other countries to lower their tariffs on us, but hasn't the practical effect been to get them to raise their tariffs on our products?
So one of my favorite quotes of this president happened just yesterday when he said, "We've been the piggy bank for the world, and that's got to stop." If you look at Angela Merkel's Europe, you see a continent where we run a $151 billion trade deficit in goods every year. Germany has tariffs on autos 4 times higher than our tariffs on equivalent German imports here, and they sell us 3 times as many cars as we sell them. So on the issue alone, we have allies strategically, but when it comes to these trade disputes, these allies basically are robbing us blind. The president is not going to put up with that. And in terms of this retaliation, I want to get back to the Canadian miscalculation here. The Canadians, because this speaks to your retaliation.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I do want to move on because we've got limited time, and I've got to...
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. Look at my African American over here. When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists. Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now? They call her Pocahontas.
Wow. Well, this is a very perverted man.
What are you waiting for? Do it! Just